Good morning, students. How are you all? Hope you all are fine. Today, we are going to read the chapter The Lost Child from the book Moments, in which we will discuss about the relationship of a child with their parents. As we know, family is the single most important influence in a child's life. From their first moments of life, children depend on parents and family to protect them and provide for their needs. Parents and family form a child's first relationships. Family provides all members with security, identity, and values, regardless of age. So let's start The Lost Child by Mulk Raj Anand. Few lines for the writer. Mulk Raj Anand was born on 12th December 1905 and died on 28th September 2004. He was an Indian writer in English, notable for his depiction of the lives of the poorer caste in traditional Indian society. One of the pioneers of Indo-Anglian fiction. Anand is admired for his novels and short stories, which have acquired the status of classics of modern Indian English literature. They are noted for their perceptive insight into the lives of the oppressed and for their analysis of empowerment, exploitation, and misfortune. He became known for his protest novel Untouchable, followed by other works on the Indian poor such as Coolie. Now, introduction of the lesson The Lost Child. The Lost Child is the story of a small child who gets lost in a fair. He had gone with his parents to the fair but loses them when he gets engrossed in looking at a roundabout swing. The story the story highlights the bond of love and affection that the child shares with his parents. Now let's start. It was it was the festival of spring from the wintry shades of narrow lanes, and allays emerged a gaily clad humanity. Some walked, some rode on horses, others sat, being carried in bamboo and bullock carts. One little boy ran between his father's legs, brimming over with life and laughter. Now, wintry shades of narrow lanes and alleys. Meaning is, in the winter season, the narrow lanes were full of shade. Emerged as came out, and brimming over means to be full of something. The story is set in the spring season as the winter season has just ended. All the people came out of their houses. They were cheerful as the chilling cold weather had ended. People conveyed through different modes foot, horses, bamboo carts, and bullock carts. A little child was accompanied by his parents. He ran excitedly and often banged into his father's legs. He was full of life, excitement, and laughter. Come, child, come, called his parents as he lagged behind, fascinated by the toys in the shops that lined the way. Lagged behind, it means was left behind. Fascinated by means attracted to, and lined the way, was set up along the way. Now the child was attracted to the toys which were displayed at the various stalls, as he would be left behind. His parents would call him to come with them. He hurried towards his parents, his feet obedient to their call, his eyes still lingering on the receding toys. As he came to where they had stopped to wait for him, he could not suppress the desire of his heart, even though he well knew the old cold stare of refusal in their eyes. Lingering. Lingering means lasting for a long time. Receding, left behind as he walked ahead. Suppress means put an end to something. Now, cold, without any feelings and emotions. The child was obedient and would walk towards them on being called, but his eyes would keep on looking at the toys that he wanted. As he reached them, he couldn't control his desire to buy a toy. He was familiar to the reaction that they would give. He knew that they would stare him, indicating denial to buy him the toy. The child knew the emotionless way in which they would stare at him. I want that toy, he pleaded. Now the child was unable to control his desire any longer. He said that he wanted to buy the toy. Now his father looked at him red-eyed in his familiar tyrant's way. Now what is tyrant? It is a cruel and oppressive ruler. So the father's eyes grew red with anger. He looked at the child just like a cruel ruler who was trying to oppress him. His mother, melted by the free spirit of the day, was tender and giving him her finger to hold, said, "Look, child, what is before you?" Melted means became tender and loving. Now the mother became emotional due to cheerful mood. Lovingly she gave her finger to the child to hold and guided him to a place. She asked him to see what was in front of him. It was a flowering mustard field, pale like melting gold, as it swept across miles and miles of even land. A group of dragonflies were bustling about on their gaudy purple wings, intercepting the flight of a lone black bee or butterfly in search of sweetness from the flowers. The child followed them in the air with his gaze till one of them would still its wings and rest, and he would try to catch it, but it would go fluttering, flapping up into the air. When he had almost caught it in his hands, then his mother gave a cautionary call. "Come, child, come! Come on to the footpath." Now, pale, a word came pale here. The meaning is dull, colorless, and gaudy, extremely bright and showy. Now, there was a vast field full of bright yellow colored mustard flowers. Now, they seemed like flowering streams of gold and were widespread. A group of dragonflies, black bees, and butterflies buzzed around, sucking the nectar from the flowers. Now the child looked at them as they flew around. When one of them sat somewhere, he tried to catch them, but the tiny creatures would fly away the next instant. The mother called out to him as they started walking down the footpath. He ran towards his parents gaily and walked abreast of them for a while, being, however, soon left behind, attracted by the little insects and worms along the footpath that were teeming out from their hiding places to enjoy the sunshine. Now, abreast means side by side and facing the same way, and teeming out is to pour or empty out something. So the child ran towards his parents and he walked next to them, but after a few steps, he stopped to see the insects who were coming out of the soil. Once again, the child was left behind. "Now, come, child, come," his parents called from the shade of a grove where they had seated themselves on the edge of a well. He ran towards them. Now, what is grove? Grove is a small wood or a group of trees. Now, here the parents called him. They sat next to a well under the shady trees. Now, the child once again ran and joined his parents. A shower of young flowers fell upon the child as he entered the grove, and forgetting his parents, he began to gather the raining petals in his hands. But lo, he heard the cooing of doves and ran towards his parents, shouting, "The dove, the dove!" The raining petals dropped from his forgotten hands. Now, as the child entered the shady forested area, he was welcomed by a shower of flowers. He forgot his parents and started collecting the petals that had fallen. Just then he heard the cooing of doves and was excited to see them. Now he started chasing the birds, and in the process, the petals fell from his hand again. Now, this shows that a child got attracted toward the next thing. He forgot what he had been doing earlier. Come, child, come, they called to the child, who had now gone running in wild capers round the banyan tree, and gathering him up, they took the narrow, winding footpath which led to the fair through the mustard fields. Capers is actually a playful skipping movement. Now, here, the parents called the child who was running and playing around a banyan tree. They lifted him and walked down a narrow, twisting lane through which they crossed the mustard fields and reached the fair. As they neared the village, the child could see many other footpaths full of throngs converging to the whirlpool of the fair, and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. Now, throngs, a word came in this throngs. It means a huge crowds, and converging means gathering. Now, as they were about to reach the fair, the child saw huge crowds of people walking from all directions towards the fair. The dense crowd scared him and he stepped back for a while, but the next moment he got attracted to the mind boggling crowd of humanity. A sweetmeat seller hawked gulab jamun, rasagulla, barfi, jalebi at the corner of the entrance, and a crowd pressed round his corner at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets decorated with leaves of silver and gold. The child stared open eyed and his mouth watered for the burfi. That was his favorite sweet. I want that burfi, he slowly murmured. But he half knew as he begged that his plea would not be heeded because his parents would say he was greedy. So, without waiting for an answer, he moved on. Now, what is heeded here? Paid attention to. Now, what happened? At the entrance of the fair, to one corner, a sweet meat seller had set up a shop. He was selling various sweets like gulab jamun, rasgulla, barfi, and jalebi. Wow, tempting. The sweets were displayed at different heights and were covered with foils of gold and silver. So the boy's mouth watered when he sighted his favorite burfi, and he expressed his desire to get one in a low voice because he knew that his request would be refuted by his parents. So they would say that he was greedy for the burfi, as he did not expect that his demand would be fulfilled. So he walked further. A flower seller hawked a garland of gulmohar, a garland of gulmohar. The child seemed irresistibly drawn. He went towards the basket where the flowers lay heaped and half murmured, I want that garland. But he well knew his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers because they would say that they were cheap. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. Now, the next stall was that of a flower seller. He announced that he was selling garlands of gulmohar flowers. The child wanted one of them. Child wanted one of those. He walked towards the basket of lowers and again announced his desire to have one in a low voice because he knew that his demand would not be fulfilled. They would refuse to buy him the flowers as they would say that they were cheap. Again, the boy walked ahead without expecting a reply from his parents. Now, a man stood holding a pole with yellow, red, green, and purple balloons flying from it. The child was simply carried away by the rainbow glory of their silken colors, and he was fulfilled with an overwhelming desire to possess them all. But he well knew his parents would never buy him the balloons because they would say he was too old to play with such toys. So he walked on further. Overwhelming means it is a very strong emotion. So the next thing that the child came across was a balloon seller selling balloons of different colors of the rainbow. And the boy was attracted, obviously. Not only that boy, but even we too, isn't it? So the boy was attracted to the shiny colors of the balloons and wanted to have them all. And he knew that his parents would not buy the balloon for him as they would Yes, they would reason that he was too old to play with them. So the child walked further. Now, a snake charmer stoops, playing a flute to a snake, which coiled itself in a basket, its head raised in a graceful bend like the neck of a swan, while the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of an invisible waterfall. The child went towards the snake charmer, but, knowing his parents had forbidden him to hear such coarse music as the snake charmer played, so he proceeded farther. Now, forbidden means not allowed, and coarse is unpleasant. Now, then he paused at the snake charmer, who was playing a flute, and a snake was twisting its neck to the music. Now, the snake had coiled itself in a basket and had raised his heads out. It bent and moved its neck gracefully like a swan, and it seemed that the music of the flute was heard by the snake's invisible ears. As we know that snakes won't have ears, and created the effects of a waterfall on it, because it swayed its neck in a simpler way. The boy walked towards the snake charmer, but as his parents had warned him to remain away from the unpleasant music played by such men, so he walked further. Now there was a roundabout in full swing. Men, women, and children carried away in a whirling motion, shrieked and cried with dizzy laughter. The child watched them intently, and then he made a bold request. I want to go on the roundabout, please, father, mother. Now what happened? Then he saw the roundabout swing. It was full of men, women, and children who were enjoying the ride. The boy watched the people on the roundabout and then, with a lot of courage, expressed his desire to go on the roundabout. There was no reply. He turned to look at his parents. They were not there ahead of him. He turned to look on either side. They were not there. He looked behind. There was no sign of them. Now, what happened when his parents did not reply? He turned towards them. He saw that they were nowhere around, and he looked around and behind, but his parents were nowhere to be seen. A full deep cry rose within his dry throat, and with a sudden jerk of his body, he ran from where he stood, crying in real fear. Mother, father, tears rolled down from his eyes, hot and fast. His flushed face was convulsed with fear. Panic stricken, he ran to one side first, then to the other, hither and thither in all directions, knowing not where to go. Mother, father, he wailed. His yellow turban came untied and his clothes became muddy. Hither and thither means here and there. Now, what happened? The boy cried loudly, jerked his body, and ran here and there, calling out his parents. He was full of fear, and tears started rolling down his cheeks. And as he wailed and ran round, his turban opened, and his clothes became muddy. Now, having run to and fro in a rage of running for a while, he stood defeated. His cries suppressed into sobs. At little distances on the green grass, he could see, through his filmy eyes, men and women talking. He tried to look intently among the patches of bright yellow cloths, but there was no sign of his father and mother among these people, who seemed to laugh and talk just for the sake of laughing and talking. Intently means carefully here. Now, after some time, he gave up. The loud cries turned into mild sobs. He saw some people standing and talking and tried to find if the parents were among them. The laughter and talks of the people were meaningless for the child. He was simply searching for his parents. See, poor child. Now, he ran quickly again, this time to a shrine to which people seemed to be crowding. Every little inch of space here was congested with men, but he ran through people's leg, his little sob lingering, mother, father, near the entrance to the temple. However, the crowd became very thick. Men jostled each other. Heavy men with flashing, murderous eyes and hefty shoulders. The poor child struggled to thrust away between their feet, but knock and fro by their brutal movement he might. Now, their soldiers, the poor child struggled to thrust away between their feet, but knocked to and fro by their brutal movement. He might have been trampled underfoot. Had he not shrieked at the highest pitch of his voice, "Father, mother!" A man in the surging crowd heard his cry and, stooping with great difficulty, lifted him up in his arms. Now, congested is full of. Hefty, a word came here. Hefty, it means large and heavy. Thrust means push. Knocked, obviously, is to hit something. Brutal is harsh, rough. And trample means crushed something. Surging is powerful. Now the boy ran towards a temple which was crowded with people. He ran, though the legs of men calling out his parents. The crowd was pushing each other as he neared the entrance of the temple. The boy got scared of huge, strong men who stared people with their murderer's eye and pushed them with their strong and big shoulders. The boy could have been crushed under the feet of the men. Had his cries not been heard by a man in the crowd, he lifted the child. "How did you get here, child? Whose baby are you?" the man asked as he stayed clear of the mass. The child wept more bitterly than ever now and only cried, "I want my father, I want my mother." As the man got the child out of the crowd, he asked him how he had reached there and what were his parents' name. The boy cried even more and repeated that he wanted to go his parents. Now the man tried to soothe him by taking him to the roundabout. "Will you have a ride on the horse?" he gently asked as he approached the ring. The child's throat tore into 1,000 shrills, sobs, and he only shouted, "I want my mother, I want my father." Soothe means relax and to give comfort to someone. Now the man tried to relax the child by taking him to the roundabout swing. He offered him a ride, but the child screamed and wept loudly that he wanted his parents only. The men headed towards the place where the snake charmer still played on the flute to the swaying cobra. "Listen to that nice music, child," he pleaded, but the child shut his ears with his fingers and shouted his double-pitched strain, "I want my mother, I want my father." The man took him near the balloons, thinking the bright colors of the balloon would distract him. Child's attention and quieten him. Would you and quieten him? "Would you like a rainbow colored balloons?" The child turned his eyes from the flying balloons and just sobbed, "I want my mother, I want my father." Pleaded means requested. Double pitched strains means usage of a lot of force. Now here the man started walking back on the same route which the child had taken. So he took the child to the snake charmer also. And he asked him to listen to the nice music being played by the snake charmer. The child shut his ears with his fingers and screamed loudly that he wanted his parents. The man took the child to the bright colored balloons event, hoping that he might get cheered by seeing them. He offered a balloon to the child, but he turned away and wept for father. The man, still trying to make the child happy, bore him to the gate where the flower seller said, "Look, can you smell those nice flowers, child? Would you like a garland to put round your neck?" Bore means carried. So the man tried to make the child happy and took him to the flower seller even. And he asked him to smell the fragrance of the beautiful flowers and offered him even a garland also. Now, the child turned his nose away from the basket and reiterated his sob, "I want my mother, I want my father." Now the child refused to smell the flowers that he wanted to buy earlier because now his priority was to get his parents. Now, thinking to humor his disconsolate charge by a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter of the sweets shop. "What sweets would you like, child?" he asked. The child turned his face from the sweet shop and only sobbed, "I want my mother, I want my father." Disconsolate means here very unhappy and unable to be comforted. Charge here means a person or thing entrusted to the care of someone. Now finally the man took him to the sweetmeat seller and offered to buy sweets for him. But the child did not want his favorite sweet, but He was continuously shouting in a very loud manner that I want my father and I want my mother. So, this was the story, The Lost Child, written by Mulk Raj Anand. So, as I told you, that family is the single most important influence in a child's life. From their first moment of life, children depends on parents and family to protect them and provide for their needs. So, parents and family form a child's first relationships. Family provides all members with security, identity, and values regardless of age. I hope you like the chapter. Read it once again, and in next PPT I will provide you animated video of it. Stay safe and happy. Thank you so much.